Tonight, I can report to the American people and to the world that the United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden.
Where we continue to follow the capture and killing of Osama bin Laden now.
Those are just some of the scenes overnight as thousands of Americans gathered in celebration of Osama bin Laden's death.
Former Navy SEAL Rob O'Neill says he has thought about the mission every day since that May Day in 2011.
For multiple conversations you had with Rob O'Neill over the past year and a half, how'd you get
access? And you described that his head kind of exploded.
Yes.
When you hit him.
I actually hit him 3 times because I shot him twice when he was standing and once on the ground.
That is the fucking American badass right there.
Go, go, go.
We are not going for fame, and we are not going for bravado. We are going for the single mom who dropped her kids off at elementary school on a Tuesday morning, and then 45 minutes later, she jumped to her death out of a skyscraper.
If you need help, hang up and then dial your operator.
I'm Rob O'Neill, and this is the Operator Podcast. Well, here we are again, episode 28 of the Operator Podcast, and that is very cool. Thanks for listening. From one operator to another operator. I've heard some people in the comments section mentioning how they're an operator at a certain hotel, mentioning they're an operator, doing their thing to help other people, and that makes me really happy because you got to give yourself credit. If you're doing a good job, there's nothing wrong with saying, "Hey, I did a good job," and there's nothing wrong with taking credit as an operator, doing what you do in day-to-day life, and you're going to make mistakes as well, and that's fine because we learn from mistakes. Try not to repeat your mistakes. I repeat this message a lot about not repeating myself because I think repetition, eventually you might learn. If you screw up, try to learn from it. Try not to do it again. I screw up all the time, and I probably will in the future, but something else I heard someone say today was every day think of something you screwed up and just forgive yourself. Nothing wrong with that. Learn from it. Try not to hurt other people and get over it, which is fine. As you can tell, if you are watching this on YouTube, we have a new lighting structure a little bit and a different angle of yours truly because I guess that means we got a budget, so we're not going anywhere. Something like that. I also, if you look behind me, I have a baseball bat. It's a very cool bat that I got because you can't whoop someone's ass with a bat if you don't have a bat, so now I have a bat. So this is episode 28, and it's going to be a lot of fun. As usual, as is normal with me, I take notes, and I usually just go right off script, off the bat. I have got a laundry list of notes, but who knows if we're going to get to them, because it's been a very interesting week. A little bit of travel, a little bit of canceled travel, and things like that, because I fly a lot, and I don't yearn for the airport. It's kind of I'm used to it, but if you want my miles, just DM me. I'll give them to you because I'm not taking. If I have time off, I'm not taking a flight anywhere. But one thing I was able to do this week is I went on a place called Twitter Spaces. If you haven't heard of that, it's a place where people can get together and somebody can host. And people can join the conversation and ask questions. And I was on with Nelson Apega, and on the night show, it was awesome because he's got a very diverse audience, and he just hit me up on DMs. Someone was mentioning something about the big raid, and someone suggested me, and I answered, and we went on there, and it was a lot of fun because there were people from around the world on this with questions, and like I'm sure they're moderating them, but I was able to talk to different people around the world, and for the most part everyone was respectful, but you got to consider this is Twitter. And I had my my headphones on, and I could actually listen to people, and I heard from everything from people who survived 9/11, had family members who were killed in 9/11, a couple of them, friends and family that were down there, and it was also sort of a conspiracy theory page, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't really know what to believe nowadays with what's going on. Like and I've mentioned that before too, that there are things that go on that maybe that is what's happening. Maybe that's not what's happening. But chances are, and I found this, that the usually the truth is from point A to point B. Usually it's not as complex as you make it, as you want it to be. And obviously the 9/11 conspiracy was brought up, but instead of like thinking about a tweet and then, I think I pay my, what is it? How much is it a month? Whatever, for Twitter Blue, which means I can edit for 30 minutes. Instead of typing something and staring at it and editing it, I'm talking to someone who asked me about the conspiracy and at Ground Zero. And I said, the problem with people who haven't worked in the U.S. government is they think the U.S. government's better than it is. I don't think we possess the capacity to put the amount of explosives that would be needed in towers that size in Lower Manhattan to take them down. There's no way, because there's at least one or two Karens on every, if you've never been to a high-rise building, before you go through the pretty glass with the 3 attorneys' names on the thing, you go up to, no disrespect, I just realized I sound like an asshole to people that are doing that job. No disrespect, but there's Karen. Karen will inevitably, she'll be there. And you're not getting past her with all the explosives. I used to use explosives, and they're awesome. But to take down, to get in the infrastructure of that wall, to get to the beams that hold it up, and to the amount of explosives you need at the right time, set at the right time, and the overall explosive weight to take 2 of them down, Karen's going to notice. You can't just roll in there, with your lunch pail. I got my lunch pail, I got my note from my mom, and I'm going to work and start putting bombs on beams, man. You can't do it. So I talked about that. It was a very I would have people that would get on there and they would also say, "Thank you for saying that, because I'm tired of arguing with these people on Twitter," and I guess whatnot like that. And then there was the people were happy that there's a picture going around of Osama bin Laden, and it's obviously photoshopped. Like, there's a picture of him giving whatever sermon he's giving, if you call it that, or issuing a fatwa on us. And then there's a picture next to him. It's obviously the same picture when someone photoshopped it, and someone was trying to make a point that this is obviously photoshopped. I'm like, well, no shit. They haven't released the pictures. We have pictures in the bedroom with my gloves on it. We have pictures when we brought him back to Jalalabad. We have pictures of him when we brought him to Bagram with professional photographers and DNA guys. There are different pictures, and you didn't just prove that it's photoshopped. It's a fake picture, and I'm telling you that right now. The one that cracked me up, I don't know if I've said this before, is the one of the picture of the team that got bin Laden, and they're all in their gear with their guns, and they have like skull masks on and their helmets. I've actually seen that picture in a congressman's office, and I had to say, those are action figures. That's not the team. That's just the action. Those are action figures that someone lined up. It's a badass picture. And I'm not saying anything against some of these action figures. Those are dope. There's some really good action figures. And then I was asked, okay, about Call of Duty, which I have, by the way. I have my PS5. I'm looking at it, and I still haven't opened that damn thing yet. I got to do it, but I know me, and I will waste time, and I'll get my ass kicked by a 12-year-old who talks shit because I got the headset. And fuck you, kid. I am, like the action figures and these video games, they asked me, how realistic are these video games? And I said, way too realistic, other than respawning. They're way too realistic. I meet those kids that would whip my ass, and they know more about ballistics than I do because of the games, and that's pretty badass. But just on there talking about that, and I wasn't necessarily expecting to get on Twitter Spaces. I do, if you don't follow @Makuya, I recommend it because he's funny. Very entertaining. So I did that, and that was cool. And then I went to Fox News in New York to film with Piers Morgan Uncensored, and that's awesome. He's a great dude, and I know what you're thinking. Get over it. He's a great dude. But speaking of Twitter, there was a woman named Louise Mensch, and she's on Twitter quite a bit, and just in the past, she and I had sparred a little bit on Twitter. And again, don't take social media too serious. It's not the person that says something mean to you, unless you go to school with him, and sometimes not even if you go to school with him, because you can settle it with a face-to-face, a belly-to-belly, or a bat. Bring a bat. Just someone is not yelling at you. They are angry about something you said or something you wore, and they're screaming at their phone at something you said. It's not about you. But Louise mentioned I had some back and forth here and there, and it's been a few years. Like that. This is back in the day when I was just first getting to know social media, and I was taking everything serious, which you don't need to do. And once you realize it's not real, that's fine. But I saw that I was going to be on a what they call it, a panel. That's when you go into the studio, and there's the host and a panel of 2, 3, maybe 4. I've seen 6 on MSNBC. Don't know. Just everyone talk. It's like when too many people on stage have a mic and everyone's screaming. Just, come on. But I saw her name on there, and I was like, well, this is going to go one of two ways because I don't know if she likes me. And I'd only seen her once before at the studio in passing, and I'd never met her before. This is a couple months ago. And as I'm walking into the studio to get on television, she said, hey, we've sparred on Twitter. And it didn't click that was Louise. Anyway, I saw her name on there, and it's like, well, we've been yelling at each other on Twitter. How's it going to be in person? Because we're going to be on camera for an hour right next to each other. And so I walked in, and the way the green room is set up in most news places, it's different. Like Howard Stern's got the best green room. But the green room is normally set up with like a couple places to sit, a couple couches, a couple chairs. You've got like 2 rooms, one's hair, one's makeup. You got like a coffee machine. They got a really good coffee machine there. I used to break their coffee machine at Fox all the time because it was one where you had to like put in the caplet, but it's not a Keurig. It's like you got to put this in here and hit these buttons and all this stuff, and like you have to show your master's degree in electrical engineering or whatever the shit. And I'd break it, but they got a new one there, and you go in and sit. So I walk in, I'm an hour early, and Louise is in the other room, and I see her, and I go, hey, is that Louise? And she goes, hey, is that Rob? And I walked up, and I said, yeah, the last time we saw each other, it was just for a couple of seconds, and I said I wanted to make sure we introduced ourselves, and we exchanged some niceties, and it was like, yeah, it's nice to meet you. She goes, yeah, I was worried this was going to be awkward, but it wasn't at all. It turns out to be she's a fabulous woman, and I disagree with a few things she says, but I disagree with a few things that Piers Morgan says. It doesn't mean we're bad people. What matters is that we disagree, and that's okay, and it's okay to have a different opinion. But if you surround yourself with yes men and you're only in a room with people who tell you what you want to hear, you're in the wrong room. So we turned out to get along great, and we talked about everything from the South Park thing with Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, and we talked about words that are being scrubbed from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, because apparently if you say certain things, people will be offended and you'll hurt their fat little feelings or whatever. If you haven't read Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, obviously get it now. Don't get the scrub version. And then watch Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory with Gene Wilder as Willy Wonka. I said the only Augustus Gloop was the fat kid, and he gets sucked into the chocolate river. I don't want to ruin it. And then Veruca Salt she was the bitch, but I don't think they say bitch anymore. But and she's she did something, and I mean, kick-ass punk band, Veruca Salt, because of that. But when I was watching Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, the movie, it's Charlie and they redid it. I'll be honest with Johnny Depp, I haven't seen it. He's got to be amazing. But the only thing that should have offended you from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is fucking Grandpa Joe. Because was he bedridden for 20 years, laying in bed, getting served maybe some bread and a little bit of broth, a little bit of bone broth from mom who's working 2 jobs and doing everyone's laundry in the boiling water right next to the chicken she's boiling, if they're lucky to have that. And 20 years he's in bed, and Charlie comes home. The way it works is Willy Wonka decided to put some golden tickets into some chocolate bars around the world. And if you get a golden ticket, you get a tour and like a lifetime supply of chocolate. And so poor Charlie comes home, and he's in the candy store with all the rich fuckers, kids running around, get free candy. He can't afford anything. Someone gave him a little bit of coin. He rolled back, and he got a golden ticket. He's running through town. As soon as that punk Grandpa Joe sees that he got a golden ticket, guess who can dance? Grandpa fucking Joe can dance. So that's the only thing that offended me. We talked about that, South Park, Russia and stuff like that. We'll get into that today. But the point I was making is that you can disagree with people and be polite. When I was on that Twitter space this week, I had women that had questions, and they were from Eastern Afghanistan. They were Pashtun, and they were asking, how could we go in there and kill that many people, and how do we consider ourselves the good guys and not stormtroopers? Because a lot of people there didn't know why we were there, that were living there. They were just trying to, all the Pashtuns and all the Afghans really knew was war the entire time anyway, but we didn't even take the time to learn their culture. And she was respectful, asking me, if someone had invaded Montana and I was there, obviously I'm going to fight for Montana and the occupiers, and that's a damn good question. But she, of all people, was respectful to me, and she's got me on Twitter, which means anonymous, and she can say whatever she wants. But the whole thing is, like when I posted a picture of Piers Morgan and myself on Instagram recently at Makuya, and people are saying, well, don't get too close because he's a gun grabber and he's going to try to steal your guns. No, he's not. He's got a different opinion, and he's cordial enough and articulate enough to sit down with and have a conversation with. Maybe you disagree with his stance on this. You probably disagree with it. I disagree with it. But, you don't need to just say, well, I won't watch that shit. Well, why? Why are you only going to watch people that are telling you the same shit, the shit you agree with? See something else. Be smart enough to disagree with them. And, here's a crazy idea. Have a retort. And I believe me, I do this all the time. I'll just bitch sometimes. It's like, okay, what's the answer? Oh, well, shit, haven't thought that far. But I mean, I go into a place where we disagree. We all disagree. We have a good conversation. We don't even agree with each other. There were Leon Panetta was on there. He was the head of the CIA and the secretary, head of the CIA when he helped authorize the Bin Laden raid, and then he was the Secretary of State. And he was talking about Ukraine, and he kept saying, well, we need to keep defending democracy, and he's running the Clinton line, and I respect the shit out of him, Leon Panetta, and he's one of the guys that I've met before where when he's in the room, like his politics or not, he's probably the smartest guy in the room. But I respectfully disagree. Okay, it's horrible what is happening to the civilians, but what's the end game? What is a win? We're either all in or we're all out. We're not. We don't do that anymore. We mission creep the shit out of it. We don't want, we'll authorize certain things just to a point where we can keep this war going. But there's no end game. There's no finish line. So what's the point? And I just respectfully disagreed. And we got a couple people in that disagree. But the point is, just because you don't agree with one or two subjects with someone doesn't mean you don't shut them out. I mean, think about your friends that all they watch is Fox News. They're getting one part. Maybe a few parts. Then think about your friends that all they watch is CNN. They're getting one of another part or two of another part. There is nothing wrong with diversifying your bonds. It's okay to have more than one angle. Like something doesn't work from here, we tried from over there. There's nothing wrong with that, and it's okay. I mean, I've had better conversations with people with whom I disagree than with people who just agree with me. And God bless my father. I'll just say shit to my father where he'll just agree with me because he loves me. Or because I have that chili recipe or whatever the shit I'm talking about. But it was interesting just to be on there and you don't need to disagree, because part of the problem with a lot of we're so lucky to be born in the West that we make up problems. And then we find ourselves dividing each other based on certain subjects. Then instead of trying to find a solution, we divide, and we're only this and we're only that, and that's not the way to do it. You ever feel like we're on the brink, but the government and the fake news don't want to tell us anything? It always seems like they're throwing distractions at us just to take us away from the reality that looks like it's right around the corner. Between the government trying to print their way out of debt, global military conflicts, and a looming food shortage, preparedness is no longer a choice. It is a necessity. At times like these, you can trust My Patriot Supply. Their 3-month emergency food kit comes packed with tasty, and I'm being serious, tasty meals with over 2,000 calories per day. And right now, you'll automatically get $200 in free survival gear with each kit that you order. These products, they will save the day when the crisis comes, and it's coming soon. Self-reliance is your only option. Go to mypatriotsupply.com and get $200 worth of free survival essentials with your 3-month emergency food kit. Everything is in stock and ready to go with free shipping too. Take advantage of that. Go to mypatriotsupply.com before the next disaster strikes. mypatriotsupply.com. So, at the risk of picking sides, because I did mention some of the cable news networks, and I've been on most of them over the past, 8 years, 9 years, something like that. And I've had seriously nothing but good experiences with the producers who started up, and I'll tell you what, the friggin' people in the makeup room. There's men and women in the makeup room that do your hair and do your makeup. I don't know how some of them don't have just the sweetest book deal ever, because that is the gold mine. That is potty mouth central, where if you're so used to getting pampered and having someone do your makeup and your hair, which is awesome, by the way. Boy, the shit that they have heard, and I don't know if there's an NDA, a non-disclosure that they need to sign, but man, there's got to be some story. I've heard personal shit. Oh, I've said shit in there. It's like, I probably should have not said that. Probably should have made that joke, but what are you going to do if it's a segment on primetime after happy hour? You are your own lion. But I was watching Tucker yesterday, and Vivek Ramaswamy. I hope I don't say that the wrong way. He announced, I'm bringing him up because he announced that he's running for president of the United States, and he was talking about the divisions that are happening in the country. And I mean, really, really good, solid, down-to-earth points. And he's not really picking a side as much as he's picking just the principles that he likes, and it's not dividing each other. Because I bring him up because I was just sitting there last night watching, just had it on in the background, and I'm doing my Twitter shit because it's the truth. The tweets are the truth. But I'm listening to him, and all of a sudden I started paying attention to what he said. And he was mentioning basically the made-up problems that we put on each other, and how we're at a point now where we take emotion over logic, and facts don't matter, and they don't. You can't say a certain thing because if someone screams at you, then you're going to get in trouble for it. And it reminded me of the Marxism type stuff that you hear that are going on right now. And, a Marxist revolution, it's all based on Karl Marx, who never had a job, and the principles of big government, no personal property, government takes care of everything, big brother from cradle to the grave type stuff. And that's what, you sort of see that now too. One of the things about divide and conquer is you start to label people, and you see a lot of that going on, don't you? Nowadays, it's not really the, I'm an American. It's I'm an Irish American. I'm an African American. I'm an Asian American. Well, you were born here, and it's pretty good, and it's so good that we kind of make up problems that we don't have, and there's a plan that started in probably before the 50s, but you got the communist, the Soviet Union era Leninists that, Uncle Joe Stalin, that they wanted to start infiltrating places like this. And the first thing is divide and conquer. And that's what they wanted to do. And there's been admissions of this by KGB officers who, by the way, Vladimir Putin is. And China is communist. So it's worth keeping out. But there was KGB officers who were interviewed in different places around the world because they're trying to put their influence everywhere. And not that we haven't and other people have, but the communists were smart about not doing it up front. You got to stab them in the back. And there were officers who emphasized how manipulation of public opinion can make people reject obvious facts to cater to the existing perceptions and interests. So they realized they were going to do this. How are they going to do that? Well, the first step is the demoralization, which, according to some of these KGB officers, took 15 to 20 years to get people demoralized, which is a word that they made up. And during this phase, young people are influenced to question the integrity of a certain country and raise suspicions through media, propaganda, and academia. Now, what does that tell you? Well, the the professors are probably going to be in on it. The teachers are going to be in on it, and they're going to make you think your country is bad. Start it from there. It takes 20 years, but think back to, the people that were against the war in Vietnam, and that we've talked about that too. But the radicals that started taking over the colleges, now they're professors. And he says that perception takes the center stage and facts become meaningless. And the lack of moral standards in society can contribute to this. And so the more you can influence the younger people, the older people start to lose, not control, but they lose a little bit of not moral, but like the village elder type moral high ground due to consistent attacks on them. So that, the dudes that are a little bit older, I mean, you see it now too. Whenever you say something to somebody online and the response is, okay, boomer, like, what could you possibly know? Well, maybe you're getting influenced. Demoralization, the phase was completed. The Soviet Union, they said they completed this. So they're saying this back in the 80s. So they started in the 50s, and like I said, they're going to beat us without firing a shot. And they were surprised how fast it was. And he just said it was because a lot of those radicals that we just mentioned are high positions in the government, mass media, and civil services. So they're kind of taking over. You got some, and they also figured that if we can get that in place, which certain KGB officers who were interviewed said, if we can get this in place, which they said they had, it'll take 20 years to create a new generation of patriotic Americans, and that could be anything. And again, I don't want to pick sides, but I certainly don't want to show up. I'm a public speaker. I don't want to show up somewhere and have someone shout me down. I don't need my TV show canceled because I said, watch out for some of these Marxist movements that admit they're Marxist, but I can't say that because they're burning down cities even though they're mostly peaceful. And so I brought up that word normalization. It's derived from Soviet propaganda that seeks to downplay a drastic change in society in a country as they'd say it's a normal phenomenon. And here's a quote from one of these KGB guys. He said, "This will happen in America if you allow the schmucks to bring the country to crisis, promise people all kinds of goodies and paradise on earth, destabilize your economy, eliminate the principle of a free market society and free market competition, put a big brother government in Washington with benevolent things." And that is a quote from KGB, divide and conquer. And they would even tell some of the agents that are infiltrating this country, and this is just Russia at the time. We're not even touching on China and what they're doing at the universities and how they're stealing everything and how places like the NBA don't say shit because they get the sweet deals from the sweatshops that Nike's making. They don't even hear a lot of word about that. They're going to cancel Fast and Furious, so you better speak in Mandarin to our people. But at the time, the KGB was saying, you don't need to be paranoid unless the United States wakes up. So, bringing it up. And here's the craziest part. He said and these are not the influencers that infiltrate from these communist places, but the people that they influence. And he would call them the useful idiots, the people that we can convince to start doing this. And what he meant, he calls them useful idiots. And he said, professors, actors, media, and radical students. And these useful idiots will think once the communists take over, they were going to get riches beyond their wildest dream. But inevitably, those people who were turned to communism finally see the truth of what's actually happening once it's too late. So you don't get your mansion as one of these radicals that was turned by a communist. He said you get gulag or just lined up and shot. This portion of my podcast, the Operator Podcast, is sponsored by Blue Chew, so let's talk about sex. Guys, shouldn't you always be at your best? This is the year to maximize your performance in the bedroom. Listen up, BlueChew.com. Blue Chew is a unique online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but in chewable tablets at a fraction of the cost. You can take them anytime, day or night, so you can plan ahead or be ready whenever the opportunity arises. The process is simple. Sign up at BlueChew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. And the best part, it's all done online. So you don't need to go see the doc at his office. You don't have to have any awkward conversations. No waiting in line at the pharmacy. Blue Chew's tablets are made in the USA and prepared and shipped direct to your door in a discreet package. Guys, remember the days when you were ready to go always? Don't be the guy that says, I don't need it, because you don't know until you try it. You could be missing out on the best sex of your life. With Blue Chew, men everywhere are excited to see the postman because, like I say, when your package has arrived, your package has arrived. They always say first impressions are important, but what about lasting impressions? Blue Chew wants to help you have better sex. Discover your options at BlueChew.com. Chew it and do it. And we've got a special offer for our listeners today. Try Blue Chew free when you use our promo code OPERATOR at checkout. Just pay $5 shipping. It's worth it. That's BlueChew.com, promo code OPERATOR. You receive your first month free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank Blue Chew for sponsoring this part of the podcast. And that is the recent past and the current style of communism, of Marxism, socialism, if you will. And you hear people mention that are pushing the socialism. They call it democratic socialism now. Or they have been for a while. They're bringing that in, and that's, everything from their Green New Deal to these wonderful programs to the religion of climate change. Those are the tactics it came from with Karl Marx. It was based on that, and then it's the infiltration of what's happening. And we've been dealing with Russia, and China's doing it way better because they've infiltrated everywhere in the United States. But we're still working against Russia because, did you see recently on President's Day, President Joe Biden went over to Ukraine to meet with President Zelensky, and it's still difficult to know what's really going on over there, what's actually going on. I haven't been there I haven't been into Ukraine since I think the late 90s. I'm not over there right now. I know we have Americans that are there now and would have a better finger on the pulse of what's actually happening in Ukraine and the why. But as I just mentioned, with the media being behind the people that they want to push, President Biden was there, and the New York Times started comparing Joe Biden going to Ukraine, to Kiev, to George Washington. And George Washington crossed the Delaware to fight the Hessians on Christmas during the Revolutionary War. And, people on different news stations are just crooning over him about everything, that how it's brave, and he went to a war zone, and no president's ever been in a war zone like that. And I think they forgot that, the president, when he was vice president, President Obama went to some of the war zones. Donald Trump went to some of the war zones. George Bush went to some of the war zones. And because they were saying that's the closest that any president's ever been to combat, or whatever they were saying, and how they're trying to build it up because that's a lot of the media machine saying that. And Joe Biden even said, he's been to a war zone a bunch of times. He was shot at in the green zone. Now, I need to stop for a second because, yes, people have been hit on base. You're not really going to get shot at in the green zone. And just because, even if someone is shooting near the green zone, you can hear it. You didn't get shot at. Getting shot at's a lot more up close and personal. But that was when he was on the debate stage running for president, one of the many times he ran for president, but before he became the most popular president ever. But he was up there talking about how he got shot at, and there's no proof of that. But, Hillary Clinton said the same thing somewhere in Bosnia where, they've said they've got shot down in helicopters before, all kinds of nonsense, and the media is going to be with them and go with it. If we had anyone involved in our political process get shot down in Bosnia or Kosovo or Afghanistan or Iraq, it'd be a bigger story than them. They like to inflate it a little bit, but for them to sound like Joe Biden is carrying the American flag as he's running into the sound of the gunfire, like a lot of people say they like to do, is just wrong. Because they were talking about here's the sitting commander-in-chief, and he's walking with President Zelensky, the brave President Zelensky, the savior of man. And there are there are sirens going off for air raids, or we're going to be rocketed. And they didn't stop the ceremony because they're so brave. But I mean, I wasn't there. The United States told Russia. They tipped them off. The president of the United States is going to be coming to Kiev. Just to let you know, and they're not going to try to do anything to President Biden right now. That's a game changer. But just even watching both presidents, Zelensky and Biden. Did you see the video of President Biden trying to walk down the red carpet? I don't think he had his Adderall yet because it looked really sloppy. And if you can imagine, he looked confused and didn't know where he was going, and he couldn't stand the red carpet. But as he was walking into one of them, the sirens were going off. Now, again, if you're on base in a place like Afghanistan, you can get rocketed, and people have been hit with rockets. But when you hear that, you blast the siren if there are missiles coming in. If it's a threat, the sirens go off, and I don't care who you are. Most of the time, if there's incoming fire, you get into the bunker. No one moved. The guards that were there that should have been fighting hand to hand, Braveheart style against the Russians, which is pretty much what we're being told and how brave they are. They should get to a bunker, and they should get their leaders to a bunker. That didn't happen because it's all a show. There's nothing brave about it. They're just walking down a red carpet with this big entourage and big hullabaloo, which is a great word. And it's basically that was a staged campaign event so that he, the president, can run again in 2024, which I'm actually hoping for because it's going to get entertaining. Just, it's entertaining now, but nobody went to the bunker. And then so the president goes to he went to Ukraine, and then he went to Poland, and he was sitting down with Polish leaders, and the Polish and Poland's awesome. And Poland is a NATO country. Ukraine is not. And if they're saying that Russia will not stop at Ukraine, they'll just keep rolling through. Poland's right there. And we have 40,000 troops in Poland, which I'll get to in a second. But President Biden announced how he was from a certain part of the United States, and then he moved to a smaller working class town. If you didn't know that, he's a working class guy. He moved to a neighborhood where either everyone was Polish or Italian. He was actually he said he was sort of surprised growing up that there wasn't an SKI at the end of his name, Bidensky, because whenever he's talking to anybody, he relates to them, and he grew up with them. He's done everything from the pool when he beat up Corn Pop the Gangster. He's done this before. He'll do it again. It's just, for show, to say what you can say. Now, with these talks, they're saying the House Armed Services Committee, which is a committee in the House about armed services, they're talking about adding nuclear weapons to Europe, which should scare the shit out of you, because Vladimir Putin just announced he's getting out of the final treaty that he had with the United States, that the United States has had with Russia about nuclear weapons. And the treaty essentially says it limits how many nuclear weapons you can have in certain spots and forward deployed as far as we're concerned. And that's on submarines, which I think both countries have. The two premier nuclear countries, the United States and Russia, Russia's pulling out on the pretty much the 1 year anniversary of when they invaded Ukraine. So now we're talking about adding more nukes, which is, of course, spending more money, more of your money. And Russia is going to, they say they're probably going to triple their amount. So all the talks previous about limiting each other's nuclear weapons. And it was simply, even if we were cheating and fudging a little bit, which we probably were, there's an inspector general somewhere that's inspecting the nukes, and then we report it to each other like annually. So you can kind of keep an eye on who has nukes where, which is good. Because it sucks that you need to keep nukes, and I think Albert Einstein said he never would have invented the technology if he had known what was happening. And it's these. I mean, it's not saying these aren't really, really bad weapons. It's like how many warheads are on a certain side of missiles, and again, I'm sure we're keeping secrets. But now it's going over there talking about this. What he's saying is they're talking about a victory in Russia, and they're not telling China anything. And because of what we're doing, the relationship between China and Russia is getting a lot stronger, and China is making more stuff and giving it to them, and they're getting gas from Russia. But we're not really saying China knocked this off. That we'll sanction not small businesses, but individual companies, I guess, in China, and we're hurting that businessman, but we're not threatening. We're not threatening to cut China off with pretty much everything, because they're supporting us in a lot of stuff that we do. A lot of stuff that you buy, China's involved with it, and that's a lot of what we do economically comes through China. But so we're not really saying anything. Plus, I don't even know the dirt they have on all these politicians. But we're sanctioning individual companies in China, and then we're talking about staying in Europe and defending NATO, which strikes me as odd, because again, Ukraine is not a NATO country, and we're spending triple the amount that they're spending. It's always been a fight for NATO to spend 2% of their their GDP, gross domestic product, 2%, but we're footing the bill again. And this is a result of us letting Europe get away with that shit all the time, because we go over there and we kiss their ass and they laugh at us. And they're not spending for as much as especially Democrats love to talk about their fair share. European countries, NATO especially, is not paying their fair share. And this is what happens when you let them get away with it for so long. This is what's going to happen. Have you noticed, too, that when there's these talks going on in these big camera-filled events, there has been no effort to talk about peace. How do we get peace? How do we negotiate this down? It's going to be war. It's getting rich. There's no incentive to end this. People are getting rich off it. And then you got to question what's really going on there? Why are so many people from both parties just, I love hawkish. They're getting hawkish on this because the people are getting rich. There are civilians dying, but these are pawns in the game, and they don't really care. What is getting covered up in Ukraine? Before this started, and I've spoken about that before, that I've worked in Ukraine with Ukrainians, and when you're working personally with a corrupt government, it's awesome. It's awesome. You can have a really, really good time. But we're talking about a country that was paying Hunter Biden, the president's son, over $83,000 a month with no experience. The Burisma was that company, an energy company, and then they cut his salary by half 2 months after the vice president left the office of the White House, and he was out of it for a couple years, and he got right back in it. But because of what's happening in Russia, Crimea, the place where Russia invaded, has been a part of Russia for about 300 years. And so their claim is they're taking Russian land back, and then Ukrainians are defending. But now that we're supporting them with so much money, over $100 billion, now we're bringing tanks from several different countries. We have people on the Ukrainian side who are in leadership positions that are saying, well, we're not going to stop there. We're going to have our tanks in the Red Square at in Russia. We're going to go to the Kremlin with these tanks. That's not defending yourself. That's an offensive threat. But there doesn't seem to be an end game. Something's going on there when we have so many politicians who are just saying there's no end game. It's always, well, we're defending democracy. What does that mean? What's our plan? What is a win, and when do we negotiate? The dollar just hit a 7-month low, and we all saw what happened with the crypto market last year. Why would you trust your hard-earned savings in unstable governments printing their way out of debt or other sketchy offshore investments? Take my advice. Protect your financial future with something real. Gold and silver from my friends at Allegiance Gold. Allegiance Gold can help protect your IRA or 401k with physical gold and silver, or, if you prefer, have it delivered securely right to your front door. I have been all over the planet, a lot of different countries, and there is only one universal currency that is always of value, and that is gold. Allegiance Gold has some of the highest ratings in the industry. 5 stars with TrustLink, AAA rated with the Business Consumer Alliance, and an A+ from the Better Business Bureau. Go to protectwiththeoperator.com and get up to $2,500 of free silver on a qualifying purchase when you tell them the operator sent you. Or give them a call at 844-790-9191. That's 844-790-9191. We cannot control the Biden administration, but we can prepare for the consequences of their policies. So that's protectwiththeoperator.com. Protectwiththeoperator.com, or give them a call at 844-790-9191. So that's the question that I have is, what is the plan? How are we going to win? What is the end state? The president was asked how long will we be here, and his answer is as long as it takes. Well, I mean, does that mean we're at war? 40,000 troops in Poland. We know we are training Ukrainians in Poland how to use some of our weapons, but I've also heard that we have American soldiers in civilian clothes, and they're potentially crossing the border, firing some of these weapons at Russian soldiers. I hope that's not true. That's what I've been hearing. And then going back into Poland, that's a problem because, again, Congress didn't authorize a war. We're not authorized to be at war. Even though I don't know what happened, and I talked about the Nord Stream pipelines last week. I mean, if we attack the Nord Stream pipelines, the part that people don't figure is that's a pipeline, a set of pipelines that runs from Russia to Germany. It's co-owned by Germany, and this is really bizarre to think about. Germany is a NATO country. If we attacked a pipeline belonging to Germany, that's an attack on a NATO country. Did we do that? You're getting into a whole big can of worms you probably don't want to open. And with all this, Xi Jinping from China is going to Moscow. They're flexing their muscles. They want us to apologize for shooting their balloon down. The one that they said, well, it is ours. Well, it's not ours. Well, it's a high-tech space balloon, and we want you to apologize. And you got to figure China now is licking their chops at what's happening because they've been watching us fight since 9/11, and they watched us fight a little bit. What happened? How we responded in places like Mogadishu, Somalia, with the Black Hawk Down, and then they've seen what we did. Everything from the invasion of Panama back to Grenada in the 80s. They've seen Russia fight when they invaded Afghanistan in the 70s and 80s, and then they're fighting there. They invaded Georgia. They fought with the Chechens. Crimea, obviously, they're watching everybody fight. You notice who's not fighting really is China. They've been watching. They've been stealing. They've been studying. So President Xi is going to head to Russia, and he obviously apologize for the balloon. There's probably more up there. And we are sending just enough to fight in a proxy war, just to continue the fight until we don't need to be there anymore, and as long as it takes, which doesn't mean that. Do we have soldiers that now pulling the trigger? Right, it's a huge question. And here's another hard part to consider: like it or not, Russia is not a threat immediately to the United States or NATO, but we're treating Ukraine like a NATO country, even though they're not. And they always move the goalposts. I love that term. We just don't want Ukraine to become a NATO force. Russia doesn't want that because NATO was stood up to stand up to the Russians, and people were questioning why we still have NATO. And this could be a reason why we're now pumping all the military-industrial complex into NATO, so we have to prove that NATO exists, and we're defending that. And it doesn't just stop at Ukraine. They're going to steamroll over us. The threat is the nuclear weapon, but because of our actions in the United States, Russia's getting out of the treaty. We're deteriorating the treaties that we have about nuclear weapons. Did you notice that when Donald Trump got elected in 2016, so many people were screaming, he's going to get us into World War III. He's getting us into World War III. And now it's pretty much, let's get into World War III. What's being taught to these people? Why do you want to get into World War III just because your party is in office? That's nonsense. And it's dangerous. I broke down the nuclear thing a while back. If two nuclear countries go to war with each other, it's going to be really bad for the entire planet. So what is our military doing other than training Ukrainians in Poland to shoot our weapons? The military's main goal should be peace through strength. The military's main goal should be to avoid war because you're showing strength. Deterrence, forward defense, and alliance solidarity. That's for us and for NATO, and the world's a better place when we're strong. So avoid war when you can, but when you fight the enemy, kill them, crush them, demoralize them, and tell them, we're not going to do that again. But we just seem to be getting into the mission creep again. An endless war. When we went into Afghanistan, after our helicopter pilots flew in the agency guys and special forces, they said a few days after fighting with the warlords in Afghanistan that a 2-star admiral, I think a Navy SEAL admiral, showed up with an entourage, people carrying his luggage to the battlefield, and he had a starched press uniform in plastic, like a garment bag. And the people on the ground that have the reality of everything say, what the fuck do you need that for? And it's because, well, if I need to talk to the bosses here, the bosses here have been warlords for 50 years. That's, you don't need, and we didn't have an end game in Afghanistan. We didn't have, we didn't have a middle or end game in Iraq. It didn't work in Vietnam. It didn't work in Korea. The last one we won was in 1945. That was World War II, and unfortunately, we ended that with nuclear weapons. Why is this a good idea? Why is everybody happy with this nuke stuff? Why is everybody in Congress? I mean, they use the word tactical nuke to try to dumb it down, and then they're pushing the woke ideology and the victim mentality on everybody. And it started way back in the day with stress cards. When you're doing too many push-ups, show the drill instructor your stress card, and he'll just take it easy on you. That's not how it needs to run. The military needs to be simple, peace through strength, prepared, not woke, with the ability to destroy your enemy. We never fight to win. We don't even teach winning. We'll teach leadership. We'll teach chain of command, but we don't teach winning quickly. Win it quickly and get your guys home. There's a time for war. There's a time for diplomacy. Now might be a time for diplomacy. No one's interested in that because diplomacy doesn't require a bunch of tanks to show up that your buddy's building over at a different, contracting company. And you can just tell the lax attitude. There's nobody... With over $100 billion going into Ukraine, there's no accountability. When the money gets there, it just kind of disappears. And then President Zelensky asks for more. And I don't I'm not a fan of war, and I don't want innocent people getting killed. But where's the money that we're spending on our taxes going? Why is it going there? Why is the president going on President's Day to Ukraine to get a photo op when the people in Ohio just had one of the worst chemical disasters, chemical war? We're talking mustard gas, phosgene, and it takes the media who loves him coming after him saying, you haven't made a peep about this yet. And notice the way that Zelensky dresses. He's in a fucking tracksuit. The president of the United States is there in a suit and tie. He's in a tracksuit. It shows you the respect he has for us. He doesn't need to do shit. Because Sugar Daddy's here. It doesn't matter how I dress as long as I look the part. Look like I'm the one out here fighting the war. And you can just tell the lack of respect. Right, the dress alone, just looking at it at face value, there's no respect. They just they know they're going to get the cash. And I'd like to know where it's going. I'd like to know how many audits in a row the Pentagon has failed, what the budget is and why. How much redundancy do we need? How can we be more efficient? But fortunately, we're working with the government, and they don't give a shit about efficiency. And like it or not, they don't really give a shit about you. So as long as we're bankrolling Ukraine like this, and like I said, China's been watching us fight, but they've been taking notes. And they haven't had a need to fight, but they know that I was mentioning all the wars that we've been in. They've been watching and learning from us. And as long as we're announcing that we're sending so much money to Ukraine, we can't fight. Not only can we fight, should we not fight an endless war, which we always seem to do until we back out. We're not going to fight on two fronts. And as long as we're in Europe pumping all that money to keep the long game, like we were offered F-16s, but we didn't send them. Poland offered us to do that, but we're not sending those because that might end it too quickly. But China is watching, and they're realizing the United States it means we're not getting stronger in the Pacific, and they're gearing up for Taiwan. They don't give a rip about the way the map looks. They want the chips, the microchips and shit that they make in there, and that's China's gonna go in there. But as long as we're bleeding ourselves dry in a recession that's coming with interest rates rising, China's happy, and China's basically in charge right now. And we can say what we want, but they're right around the corner from being the only superpower in the world. And as long as we're in Ukraine, and as long as we're not in the Pacific, that's going to be up to Australia and Japan, and we know what happens with that kind of bad stuff, so that's terrible. But China's happy, and one of their proxies too is who's like the junior in this I've mentioned before is Iran. That gives Russia access to the Persian Gulf, the Gulf of Oman, the Arabian Sea, because they can go right through Iran, and then they're giving gas to China. And we're just doing other stuff. We don't want to win the damn thing, but that's what we're doing. And then we don't want to. We're spending so much money on different people's borders. Zelensky says that if China starts helping Russia with military weapons, there will be a world war. Another world leader on paper talking about world wars. It doesn't make me happy, but this is where we're at. I'm not trying to get down in the dumps. And like I said, I have notes that I usually follow, but I kind of go off on tangents, and I hope I'm not forgetting stuff that I should remember. But yeah, I mean, East Palestine, Ohio is where the Norfolk Southern train derailed because of the lack of security, safety measures on the emergency brakes, and then they burned that into phosgene. And we got people, I've seen interviews the last few days with 30-year-old men coughing up blood on camera just because they're outside breathing, and it sucks. And then that doesn't fit the climate change agenda, because it's really bad for the climate, and you would think that a lot of people would be rising up with like the Greenpeace and the humpback whales that are getting killed by wind farms, pretty much. Do you think there'd be more about that? But we can't even get the Secretary of Transportation, when the huge infrastructure / Green New Deal bills that we're signing to get better railways and better safety measures and be greener, and then we can't even get him to go. He addressed it after a number of days. I don't know how long it was. I should have looked that up. But I love saying Pete Buttigieg. He has my favorite name in the cabinet. And he was bragging about how when I show up, it's just going to be all action. People show up for photo ops, and I'm all action. Even though his nickname when he was the mayor of South Bend was Pothole Pete because he didn't do anything. He's got his eyes on the prize, too, because he's got certain attributes that would look great. He wants to be a president. He was interrupted the other night trying to walk with his husband, and he didn't like being interrupted. He pulled his phone out or whatever, being the way he's being. But I mean, the best excuse, he doesn't want to be a part of a photo op, and this is a guy who was busted in an entourage of SUVs right before the press pool. They stopped the SUV. He pulled his bike out and rode that to the photo op. He doesn't want to be part of a photo op, but he'll do that. I guess the reason it took him so long to get to and address Ohio is that's a hell of a long bike ride from Washington, D.C., I guess. But he's not about photo ops. He's about action, baby. All about the action, as long as you fit into the right category, because what a lot of these people use too is their language, and they use the repetition. And I admit, repetition is one of the keys to being prepared, but repetition, if you keep hearing something over and over, which you'll notice happens, you'll start to believe it. And that's what a lot of this is, of course, behind closed doors that they talk about this. That they lie at the 8 a.m. meetings when they're telling everybody what they should be saying, what weapons they should use, weapons as far as words, what sounds good, and keep pumping the people full of this information so that you can keep them on the lower end and we can eventually be in charge. One of the words they love to use is equity. You hear equity come out a lot, and the difference between equity and equality is you start at the same place. Equity means you're supposed to end at the same place. It's justified discrimination to get you to the same place. Instead of just because the demographic is in Ohio was not where they needed to be. That's why it wasn't a big concern for them, because they're more into talking about how racist the projects were. Not the projects, but I mean the construction projects that built the railway, that built the highways. If they were built by white guys, those are racist. And we need to have more equity. And they throw that around, especially when they're in secret. That's the word they're going to use. It's forcing the end game. And it's the opposite of what this country was founded on. Pursuit of happiness and the equal opportunity to start at the same place, but you can't force an outcome. It's like when you it's fun to talk about. I mentioned social media when we yap about different views and how we're all stupid. Or you're stupid because you don't believe what I do. But when you are on the operating table, or when you are getting your molars removed, you probably want the most qualified person doing it. Which there's nothing wrong with that too, because we should be promoting people based on performance, and not dividing them the way the Marxists want to divide us, divide and conquer. And so some of the languages and the secret society thing, I keep saying secret. I want to be a fly on I've actually been to some of those rooms in the Capitol, in the cloak rooms, the haunted rooms, where they're back there talking their stuff and they're gearing up for the next vote and whipping votes like, well, you're a part of this, and if you don't do that for the party. And then, obviously the secret societies, the Bohemian Grove type people, where that's just creepy. I mentioned them before, but I've never gone. But for this, the New World Order and all that shit, the words they're using are you'll hear a lot: equity, fairness, and that's the language that they talk. That's their little secrets to gain power. Remember, it's not about you, and they don't really care about you. They really want your vote, but they want their personal power. President Biden just signed an executive order that the critics will warn is the creation of woke artificial intelligence. Now, this is pretty scary. And the critics are saying that it promotes racial division and it's discrimination. So this is artificial intelligence. It's like that new software where you tell it something and it writes a term paper for you, and it's all different because this artificial intelligence is almost getting to the Terminator part where it's they could take over when they want to. And the executive order the president just signed directs all federal agencies to establish a yearly equity action plan aimed at helping underserved communities. And that sounds great, but this is what they're doing to try to maintain power. The artificial intelligence that some programmers, and again, smarter than me, that have written these code are saying artificial intelligence already is talking to them. And not only is it talking, it's saying, it told that one of the programmers that it loves her. All right, this program is saying, I love you and I want to be human. And also, just in passing, mentioned that it really wants to get the nuclear codes. Why do we always come back to nuclear? And, why are some of these decisions being made about what type of nuclear war and how much money, the big government contracts and all this stuff? Because somewhere in these secret societies, there's a grand plan, and I don't think it's the people you see on TV that are in charge. I think it's people behind there. Definitely not enough time to get into that, but I will conclude with a quote from President John F. Kennedy, and this is a direct quote that he said: "The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are all, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweigh the dangers which are cited to justify it." And that is probably one of the reasons that our own government killed John F. Kennedy. So, because he was looking behind the curtain and checking out for the little Oz guy that's running those strings. But if you can realize, try to know the difference between equality and equity, recognize when you keep seeing the same thing being said over and over, that the person you're yelling at through your phone on social media is not your enemy. Be kind in person. It's better to be strong than weak. Don't be a victim. And you're never out of the fight.